What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Made You a Mixtape podcast. I'm your host, Jason. Welcome back to the show. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're staying safe. Now, for those of you who are new to the show, what we do is we take a guest every week. We talk about their life, their career, and we get them to kind of turn their life into a mixtape. But we're going to get to that in a little bit, because this week we are celebrating the upcoming new album from Toronto singer-songwriter Kirty. Kirty, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I am doing great. Better now that I'm chatting with you. And had a great day, feeling good. Thanks for having me. This is awesome.
So the new album is called We Are All on Fire, coming out August 20th. It's your first solo album, like first full-length solo album since 2016. Can you tell us a little bit about how it was actually making this album, through this last year and a half of basically what no musician ever wants to go through?
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of the songs and pieces of the songs were written before the pandemic hit, which is funny because if you look at some of the titles of the songs and some of the lyrics, you'd think they were written in a pandemic, but actually a lot of the pieces of the songs and songs as a whole were written before the pandemic. But as far as recording over this past year and kind of getting the album ready, I mean, it's been a whirlwind. I'm very lucky. I work and live with my partner who works in the studio with me. So we had full access to a recording studio to make this album, and still had that kind of one-on-one experience of recording. And then anyone we brought in, to my friend Josh, who co-produced and mixed, it was sent, it would be sent to him and he would work on it and it'd be sent back to us. And then we did, when we were able to do this, we did a couple sessions with my longtime bass player, Graham. So it was interesting, but honestly, in my position, which is fortunate to have the studio right there, it wasn't as tricky as I thought it might be. And I still did get that one-on-one experience with my partner and co-producer, Matt.
Now, it's interesting that you say that a lot of the songs were kind of written before the pandemic started, because if you take a look at some of the songs on the album, like God Help Us and, the appropriately titled This Year's Been Hell, you would almost think that it's almost an album of its time. So, I mean, which of those songs was actually written pre-pandemic? And do you think that's kind of the feel that people are going to get when they do listen to it, if they don't know that it was actually written pre-pandemic?
Mm-hmm. So all of those songs were written pre-pandemic, oddly enough. And it was just through the series of just bizarre events that the content is so relevant. You take a song like This Year's Been Hell. If you listen to this song, and I listen to it now, looking back, I know what I wrote the song about, but I feel like it perfectly translates to a lot of the thoughts and feelings that people were having throughout the pandemic. And the response when I released that song and that video were these really, kind of beautiful messages, not about the song being doomy or a downer, but I think that the song has kind of an undercurrent of just a little bit of helplessness, and then just thoughts around, what comes with the experiences people were having throughout the pandemic. I think it translated well. At least the messages I got, reinforced that. And I can't explain it. It was bizarre. It was weird that I wrote these songs pre-pandemic and then I released them and they were so relevant and kind of just maybe vague enough that the message translated. It's a hard one to explain. I took it as a sign that, yes, this was the time I should have released it. Things lined up perfectly, and that was that.
When you think about, the traditional album cycle, write the album, release the album, go out on tour, for the album to be coming out in August, and we are recording this in July, how much are you looking forward to hopefully kind of getting back out there and playing shows? And how has the last year and a half been not having that live show, that live interaction experience?
Yeah. Well, the live component is usually my favorite component. I write the songs, which is another favorite component, but then I record because you make a record and then you go on tour. It's been really difficult not playing live. I have to say, I'm one of those musicians and songwriters that had a really hard time even touching my guitar because it was, it felt sad. I knew there was no shows lined up, and any show that got booked, it got canceled over and over and over again. So for me, it was quite sad, and I almost didn't want to touch my instruments. So the lack of live performance, it hit me pretty hard. That's my opportunity to go out and be my most authentic self in a space where I feel 110% comfortable and happy. It's almost like my version of therapy. So you can imagine, a year without that, you feel kind of clogged up with emotional content that you're not releasing in your most kind of authentic way. That's how I felt about it. So it was really difficult. But like everyone else, I adjusted. I made some changes. I busied my mind and body with a lot of different things to keep active and to keep stimulated, and to keep kind of emoting, because usually live performance, that's my way of doing it. So that was my experience, and I am really looking forward to, you can see the world opening up a little bit. We have I play in a band called Fast Romantics as well. We were one of the lucky bands who had things booked back in 2019. So we were kind of first on the list to get these shows back in place. So we have some dates booked. And just really excited for the world to open up and to get back to playing some live music, and especially with these new songs, get ready to play them for people and kind of gauge that interaction.
When it comes to the idea of just getting back out onto the stage and all that, and how it's going to look, because you have, especially here in Ontario, we've got, hard restrictions on how many people can actually be at a show. Do you find, or do you almost fear what those first kind of early shows are going to feel like? And do you have this, almost worry that at least for a couple of months, everyone's going to be performing behind a big plexiglass shield?
Yeah. It's definitely, I recognize that we're now stepping into a new world, especially in these beginning phases as we're opening up, like you said. I do get a little nervous about, how many people are they going to let into this venue? How is that going to feel from a performance perspective? We're used to these crowded, sweaty clubs that we're playing where the level of engagement is really high, people are involved. It's hard to say what the shows are going to look like and how that's going to feel. Honestly, for me, from a very personal perspective, I'm just so excited to play shows that there could be 3 people there, all behind shields. And I genuinely think that I would still, have an amazing time and feel really connected to the people who did come. So yeah, it is nerve-wracking. And if you try and compare it to maybe the very last show you played that was jam-packed and everyone, dancing and sweaty and having fun, it's scary to think how different that will be. But I'm excited, that I feel like all you can do is sit back and look forward to what you want to do, like look forward to the shows you have and make the most of them in these initial kind of, stages.
Now, you also have a brand new video out from the new album. Can you tell us a little bit about the production behind that? Because there's quite a bit of, quality Canadian talent, aside from yourself, but quality Canadian talent in the video.
Oh, yes. This video, the Turn You On video, was, first of all, so fun. And I got to work with Ann Duras, who directed this and put the concept together. And it was such a great experience because she's such an incredibly creative person. And we had one meeting where we sat down and I just said, listen, here's the song, take a listen. I'm putting it completely in your hands to come up with a concept. And then we just kind of talked about, but here are some things that I'm looking for from this video. And, videos are so personal because you're in them, your face and body and the actions that you're doing in this video are all just coming from you. And, I'm not an actress, so I am very particular about videos, but I left it in the good hands of Anne, and she just came up with this amazing, bizarre, weirdo video that's just totally gross and weird, and I loved it. It completely resonated with me. I thought it fit perfectly with the song. And then, of course, we got the talented Chris Locke to really bring it to life with his character, and he's incredible. He's an incredible talent and a really amazing person that I got to meet for the first time. But he just brought this level of energy and just comedic acting to the video that I was so happy with at the end of it all.
As an artist, when it comes to time to make a music video for one of the songs on there, because the stories when you're writing them are so personal, or they come from a very personal place, to then put that story into the hands of a director, is there a bit of trepidation on your part when it comes to that point, or do you just trust that it's all going to go work out well, and you kind of almost have to forcefully kind of wash your hands and kind of go along with it?
Well, yeah, it's a really interesting process. I'm very, very careful and particular about the direction of a video, unless in this, when I met with Anne and we had these initial conversations, of course she comes back to me with this beautifully laid out kind of visual of what she's thinking. And at that point in this particular video engagement, I saw it, and based off our conversation, I just had this really strong gut feeling that I should just completely leave this in her hands to explore. I felt, it was just a gut feeling. Now, for the most part, like with the previous two videos I've put out, specifically the one for God Help Us, it was such a personal song, and I just did not get that gut feeling where I should just hand it over to someone. So that was a video that I chose two very close collaborators of mine. We had really open discussions about the concept. I was very precious of it. And they helped me kind of fulfill what I was thinking. And then they just contributed the right types of ideas and thoughts and feelings. So I take it very, I go into those situations very cautious when working with someone new, and just because they're so personal. And for the last video with Anne, I just had this gut feeling. I got to hand this over to her. I can just feel we're on the right path, or we're aligned in our vision, except hers is just a much more vivid vision. And I want her to fall down that rabbit hole. So that was the one exception where it was such a gut feeling,
Now, this is your first solo album, as I mentioned before, since 2016. And of course, through that time, there's been album releases with the Fast Romantics. So in between that time, obviously, juggling with the band performances and whatnot, how long did you spend writing these songs? Like, is it one of those, there was a song from 2017, there's a song from last year, or is it one of those, you just needed to sit down and focus on writing solo material?
Mm-hmm. My writing process is pretty, it ebbs and flows. So I never put intense pressure on myself to say, I'm not writing enough, or I need to write in this chunk of time. I like to keep busy with a lot of different things, and Fast Romantics is, one of those things, and a lot of other little hobbies and whatnot in my life. So I let the process ebb and flow. So if I look back over those songs, I definitely can see songs that were written 2017, 18, 19. I think mostly 2018, 19. But yeah, I don't like to put too much pressure on myself. I like to let myself, kind of ride that roller coaster of, certain times when I'm writing a whole chunk of songs and they're coming really quickly. And then other times where a song has to be mulled over a bit and it needs time to to grow a bit and revisit.
I find it interesting that you say you like to have a lot of things on the go, because anyone who knows your work with the Fast Romantics, in that band, it feels like you are the Swiss Army knife when it comes to the musical instrumentation, playing guitar, playing keyboards, playing trumpet, like how many instruments do you bring to the table when it comes to the Fast Romantics?
I mean, to date, I guess I like to play a little electric on some songs when Matt's out in the audience doing his thing. I like to kind of fill that role, and I love playing my little bobcat. I play acoustic. That's a lot of the foundation of songs in Fast Romantics are built on acoustics, so we really prioritize that sound and that kind of sonic space. I play keys and fill some parts. I have to, full disclosure, my bandmate Lisa is the virtuoso. I like parts, and I like, so I'm just stepping in and filling some spaces with that. And trumpet was something I've studied since I was in grade 9. And when I joined Fast Romantics, it was this perfect opportunity to add that texture and that sound to some of our songs. I love playing percussion. I always tell my bandmates, if I could just have a table full of percussion and that be my only job, I would be more than happy just in the back with a whole spectrum of different, percussion instruments. So yeah, I'm holding down a lot of different things in Fast Romantics, but I love filling those gaps. I love just concentrating on, these percussion elements, or just really locking in with this acoustic part, and, kind of a master of none situation. But I love that. I love that role. I love stepping in there and just getting to hone in on a sound or a texture and filling those gaps.
When it comes to the Fast Romantics writing process, when you and Matt are saying they're kind of crafting that sound, do you just how often do you sit there and go, I know the perfect instrument for this, to layer it in? Like, how is that process?
The process kind of varies song to song. There are some songs that, Matt, I see as the kind of visionary for this wall of sound that Fast Romantics is, this lush arrangement. He's always written songs like that. He's incredible in the studio and has built this beautiful studio for himself where he can experiment with all these vintage sounds, and not just vintage and modern sounds. But when we're in the process of writing together, we're in the studio together, we've really finessed our kind of one-on-one flow of how to work on a song together. And I think that we both have really contrasting strengths. So when we're co-writing a song, if Matt's gotten a song to a certain point and wants me to come in and work on it with him, or vice versa, if I have a half a song I want to bring in and say, hey, this kind of sounds like a Fast Romantic song, do you want to work on it? We just have a really nice flow. And of course we bicker in the studio, and we have our ups and downs of saying, no, this is great, no, this sucks, but I think we have really massaged a great flow in terms of the back and forth. Hey, let's try this part. And it's based on the foundation of, we're always willing to experiment. If I bring something up and he's like, I don't know if this is quite right, we're always willing to experiment. Well, let's try it out. Let's lay it down. So we have a pretty good back and forth when it comes to the flow of ideas. And, sometimes you really get in the zone and that just really flows. And sometimes it's a bit harder. You get a bit stumped on a song. And of course, we have extremely talented members in our band who come in and contribute their parts as well. So it's this machine, this pretty well-oiled machine, I would say, in terms of flow and ideas and creativity.
When you think about that last the Fast Romantics album that came out, sorry, a little bit tongue-tied here. You guys were, correct me if I'm wrong, down in California just as the pandemic was starting, kind of thing. So how worried were you guys being down there in that environment, and then the rush of we better get back to Canada before we can't get back to Canada?
Yeah, it was, we felt that crunch. And Matt and I decided to take a little extended vacation, which obviously got cut short because as that was happening and we were settling into a nice Airbnb on the coast, we all of a sudden, borders might be closing. We could get stuck, it's not a bad place to get stuck on the coast, but we definitely felt the pressure. It felt like this very distant reality, but it was a reality. It's very perplexing. We were calling our parents saying, how should we cut this vacation short? And then obviously, watching the news and talking to our parents, we're like, yes, we should definitely cut this short. And then we flew back, and just the kind of anxieties of being on the plane, people are coughing, things were real, and then we settled in, we landed, we had our 2-week quarantine we had to be in. At that point, I was like, 2 weeks, I thought, 2 weeks from doing my regular tasks, and then, I'll be back at it doing whatever. And obviously that's lasted way longer. So it was bizarre, and it was a little confusing, what do we do? And it just had never happened before. So, we were a little bewildered, but we got back, and the time off, in quarantine kind of kicked our butts into gear in terms of finishing off that Pick It Up album. And we did it all remote with the Fast Remix band, which is a big band. So that was a great kind of achievement. And there were a lot of great parts of doing it remotely. Band members had a little more time to absorb the songs and think about their parts, and then try something in the comfort of their own home, and then send it to Matt and I, who would listen to it in the studio and kind of absorb it. But yeah, it was a really interesting time, and very interesting to kind of get that Pick It Up album done and out the door.
We are talking with Toronto-based singer-songwriter extraordinaire Kirty. This is the Major Mixtape Podcast. We're going to break away for a couple seconds here and hear a little bit from one of our friends.
Hi, I'm Leah.
And I'm Beth Ann.
And we're She Will Rock You.
She Will Rock You is a bi-weekly podcast about rock history.
Each episode, we talk about an artist and their lives, but we do it a little differently.
You see, we noticed there was a lack of ladies hosting music podcasts,
so we wanted to fix it.
And here we are, two badass millennial ladies talking about rock music our parents wouldn't let us listen to.
As a bonus, you'll even get our beer recommendations at the end.
Find us wherever you listen to podcasts.
And remember, don't do drugs!
All right, welcome back to the Major Mixtape Podcast. We're sitting down with singer-songwriter Kirty talking about her new album, We Are All on Fire. Now, Kirty, let's take a look at young Kirty for a second here when it comes to, the decision to actually start to write your own music and start to performing. Like, what was it that inspired you to become a performer at a young age?
Well, I have to give a lot of credit to my mom. My mom is an incredible musician. She plays bass, she plays guitar, she sings. My whole childhood was filled with sitting down and singing songs with her. She'd play guitar, from a very young age. I was terribly shy as a kid, so it was actually kind of like torture when she'd ask me to, I have a huge family. They all live up in Aurelia, an hour and a half north of Toronto. I grew up on like a small hobby farm. So tons of big family get-togethers. She'd, start to play guitar. Hey, Kurt, come up and sing a song for your nanny and papa. So I'd get up and I'm, so painfully shy, even in front of my family. And I'd kind of squeak out a little folk song that she had taught me, or country song. And so that's where it started. And I didn't really enjoy it because, like I said, I was really shy. And it wasn't until my mom started to teach me how to play guitar that I found this new I just felt more passionate about it. Oh, I could learn a song on my own. I could learn a new song that wasn't necessarily taught to me from my mom and kind of that, oral tradition. So then I got a little bit of freedom. You learn 3 chords on guitar, and man, that's a heck of a lot of freedom. So that was the moment where I started having fun, playing around with music. And in terms of writing music, came about in such a bizarre way. I never sat down and thought, oh, I need to write a song. I didn't really think about other artists and idolize them for songwriting at that point. I remember holding my guitar and I had a strap on it. So I was like walking around the house and I was, practicing all my chords. And I very clearly remember my siblings, they were all wrestling. I grew up in this really rambunctious house. I have 4 siblings. I'm one of 4, which felt like 10. And I remember them wrestling and fighting and doing whatever, all for fun. And I started just like strumming the 3 chords that I knew. And I was making up rhymes. It was like I was making fun of my siblings in a song. And that's the first moment I ever, put together 3 chords and, ad-lib style sang over top of it. So that's how it started, which is bizarre. And then I started, learning covers. And then, I whipped off my first song at, I think the age of 15. And I didn't sit down with the intention of writing a song. I just started playing and started making up lyrics. Maybe I was too lazy to learn a cover or something. I don't know. But that's how it started. It was very organic and came out.
When you think about someone who, self-professed, shy as a kid kind of thing, and then those first couple of shows, like how daunting were those, those first times when you're on stage with your own songs and putting it out there for, not family to hear? Yeah.
Well, I remember being part of the Kiwanis Festival. Now, I wasn't singing originals, but it was like one of my first memories of like a performance for a ton of people who were judging me. And I remember my mom giving me this great advice that you'd give a kid if they were doing any presentation or public speaking or performing. She was like, just, what did she tell me? She's like, just look at the back wall, kind of like above all those people's heads in the audience and just the back wall and, do your thing. And it was really nerve-wracking. At that point, I was still very shy. And then of course there was like those coffee houses in high school where I got the nerve up to grab my acoustic guitar, sign up and, sing a cover of, I don't know, Jewel or something for my kind of like high school classmates. And again, very nerve-wracking, very shy at that point still. And I think it was probably, I studied music for 4 years at Humber here in Toronto. That definitely toughened me up in terms of performing. I was thrown, headfirst into a performance-based, very intense, contemporary music degree program at Humber. And that definitely toughens you up. And you just have to, there were so many incredible singers and musicians, and you just have to find what you're good at and, stick with it. And those self-affirmations, like, it's going to be okay. You're good at this thing. Stick with what you love and what you're good at. And so after that, it was a little downhill in terms of performance and performing my original music. But it was a slow climb to get to that place for sure.
In that kind of environment at Humber, where the people who go to, enroll in a performance class like that or a performance course, yourself included, very, very talented people, incredibly talented. But when you're surrounded with that much talent and everyone's got to perform, is there a risk of, even though it's probably unwarranted, just getting some imposter syndrome? Like, everyone else is so talented around me. Oh, dear God.
Yeah. And on top of that, so absolutely, imposter syndrome, 100%. I worked my butt off in the first couple years of Humber just to get up to the level that my classmates were at. And I say that because going into Humber, I was surrounded by, so I was in a master class of singers. They accept, I think, 11 people per instrument, roughly in that area. All of the singers I was with and the musicians had been classically trained, had all this formal training. So not only were they ahead in terms of they were just ahead in terms of all of that. So theory, ear training, all of these classes I was in, I was going off of this very homegrown, ear trained, that's where I was coming from. And I was with people who were singing like incredible classical songs, and it was a jazz focused program. So tons of people who've been playing jazz their entire life. They were scatting, and just from the vocalist kind of perspective, just singers that could do wild things with their voice. And I was just, I had grown up on these folk songs, these country songs. I had a very different timbre than a lot of people there. I had, I don't sing with vibrato, I don't sing, classical or jazz standards. So I had to learn I had to learn one jazz song that I held onto for dear life in my audition for Humber. So it was, riddled with imposter syndrome for the longest time, until I realized that what made me different, I was writing songs constantly. I held true to my roots in kind of this folk rock kind of space. I found other players at Humber who were into that. I made friends within that space. So about second year, I started to really just like put my feet on the ground and commit to what I thought I was good at, or what made me a little bit different, and really hone in on those skills and not worry myself with some of the technical things that I didn't feel I was progressing at as fast as other people.
In terms of, kind of your own personal mind space, as far as, when the first album came out, in 2016, and then the album now, what's the difference for you? Like obviously it's a brand new experience in 2016, putting that first album out. Do you find you were more comfortable with the solo album process now because of all the time as well with the Fast Romantics, or is it still just as daunting now as it was then?
I think that every album an artist makes, you learn something, you finesse your process, you realize what you're good at. I like a very intimate crew of people when I make anything creative. So in the studio, I pick select people to be in on that process. And I just find it helps kind of declutter the thoughts and suggestions that are just flying out. And that helps me make sure what's being produced is authentic, to me. But it took a while to get there. And that process of learning what works for you and how you want to take on a record, or like recording a record, that process gets finessed and massaged as you get older and wiser and you make more records. So I've definitely, the process with the first record was different from the process with the second record, and it'll be different for the next record. Just massaging that.
Getting back to those earlier days, and I always like to ask artists this as well, because I've always find it fascinating to ask them, if you remember the first time going into a record store with your own money, and not just a Christmas gift, but with your own money, and bought an album for yourself. Do you remember the first album you ever bought with your own cash?
I do. Let me think for a second. I think it was a No Doubt record. I think that was the first one. I want to get an accurate picture for you. I think it was a No Doubt record. I'm not sure which one it was. We had one CD store in Aurelia at the mall, the Aurelia Square Mall. I think, and as we chat through all this stuff and we get to kind of some of the songs on the mixtape, I grew up, in such a kind of like isolated space on a farm. And I didn't, like I said, one CD store in Aurelia, you'll start to notice, like, I was very, the music I was exposed to was very kind of limited. And it's funny because now as an adult, I'm exploring all this music that I'm calling new, but I'll tell Matt, and it's, it's old music. Like, I'm discovering REM for the first time, or I started listening to Oasis, and Matt laughs and he's like, I listened to those when I was, whatever age, but just to kind of give you a bit of context, that's where I'm coming from. But I think it was a No Doubt record. I wish I had more details for you on that.
Probably, I'm just trying to think about the year. Might be Tragic Kingdom, but kind of hard to tell. But when it comes to like, now, was this record store in Orillia, was it an independent or was it like an HMV?
It was not an HMV. So it was like an independent CD store. And back then, it was just all CDs and posters and T-shirts. They didn't stock vinyl or... but yeah, I remember I can perfectly picture exactly where it was in the mall for the longest time, and obviously is not there anymore. But we do have some cool new record shops in Orillia now, so that's a step in the right direction.
As a kid, going to that record store, how often did you just sit there and flip through the CDs or the vinyl or whatever, and just like try to find something to spark the interest? And what is it when you hear something that really kind of perks the ears up?
Yeah, I mean, the mall that I was referring to was a very quick walk from my high school that I attended. And so I do recall, walking over to the mall and, getting some lunch and then kind of like browsing through the stores and always stopping into this CD shop. Although, to kind of talk about what I was mentioning before, a lot of my exposure were these mixtapes that my mom put together. So even in high school, even in grade school, I was walking around, with my CD Walkman, and it was always these mixed burnt CDs that my mom would put together. So they'd be mixed with all these different songs, and I wasn't always aware of even the artist or the song, because she didn't have it listed anywhere. It was just these blank CDs I'd listened to. So my kind of like song or artist discovery as a young adult was pretty stunted or pretty limited to these mysterious mixed CDs I wish I could find that my mom would make and my aunt would make. They're both singers and musicians. So yeah, my taste and my kind of discovery in terms of music was very much just passed down from my mom. And I have a lot of friends who went through these amazing discovery periods when they were teens, exploring all this music. And I, oddly enough, that wasn't really my experience. I do remember going, to this particular CD shop and sifting through things, but I really wasn't up to date on like the current trends and whatnot, which makes my, my experience. And when I talk about this, when I'm visiting a radio station or something, like this podcast, it's funny. It's a funny situation to describe to people. It's a unique situation, and it definitely shaped the way that the music that I've listened to and how that's shaped how I write music. But it's a unique little tidbit about my life kind of growing up and how it relates to music.
I think this is probably the perfect time to jump into this. So it is time to ask you, Kirty.
Right.
If you had to introduce yourself to a total stranger, but instead of saying, "Hi, I'm Kirty, how you doing?" You hand them a mixtape, and on that tape, with no label, is songs that tell the story of you. What songs are on that tape or CD, and why are those songs there?
All right. So just dig into it, song by song?
Absolutely.
Awesome. So the first one that came to mind, or the first one that comes to mind, is Paul Simon's Graceland. And it goes at the top of my mixtape because my mom spun that record over and over and over again when I was like an infant, in my crib. And it's maintained one of my like favorite albums throughout my entire life. And my mom shared with me, not too long ago that she spun that record over and over and over and over again. And I just have always loved the timbre of Paul Simon's voice, and also just the qualities of that record, along with other records. But Graceland, the record and the song, is at the top for that very particular reason. And a fun tidbit, I saw Paul Simon, I guess 2 years ago. And man, he walked out on stage with his, big, beautiful acoustic guitar, and he started playing America, and Matt and I just cried. It was incredible. And so that's at the top of my list just because it was such a foundational album and song, from a very, very early age. And then next I put on my list was the Indigo Girls. And there's a very specific song called Galileo. And they're like a power folk duo. And my aunt and my mom played Indigo Girls songs constantly when I was a kid. And they have these beautiful 2-part harmonies. They're incredible singers, really like folksy. And my mom and my aunt knew all of their songs. So Galileo was one that stuck out in my head by the Indigo Girls, because that's when I started, listening to my aunts play and sing harmonies together and wondering, how are they even singing those harmonies? How do you do that, And then learning those songs and singing them with them too. I had Blue Rodeo on my list, Rose-Colored Glasses. As you can, as I get into things, there's a lot of good old Canadian content in my list.
I was about to say that's Canadian treasure right there.
Yes, and there's more to come. Like I said, grew up on a farm, very much, embedded in a family that was focused on folk music, folk festivals, country music, rock. And so Blue Rodeo, Canadian staple. I play those records, now in the car, blasting them as I'm driving up to Aurelia, and so nostalgic. And I put it kind of like third on my list because it was also the very first festival I went to. And this band I saw play live, and it was so good. And that was, at the height of these kind of like early Blue Rodeo records. So Rose-Colored Glasses was third on my list. And then to follow up with some more Canadian content, Sarah Harmer, Basement Apartment. That song and that entire record just shaped a huge chunk of my childhood into my like teens. I love Sarah Harmer. I love the Basement Apartment record and song. I learned so many Sarah Harmer covers because her vocal tone and timbre and range is really similar to mine. The songs were really easy to cover. I loved them. I thought her whole vibe was very much up my alley, and so that shaped a huge. Those were the first covers I learned, and outside of some singing along with the Indigo Girls records, but those were the first covers I learned on guitar and voice, and I could really cover her songs well because we were just. Like I said, our vocal timbres and ranges were very much, aligned. And then I have, I think I mentioned this before, as I was getting ready to go to Humber, I had to learn one jazz song because didn't know any jazz music. I had never learned any, so I didn't know any jazz covers is what I should say. I knew jazz music. So I had to learn a song and do it for my audition. And I put on my list Lullaby of Birdland by Sarah Vaughan. And she does a beautiful, beautiful rendition of this song. And that was the song I covered for my for whatever reason, that song just resonated with me. And I remember, connecting with a jazz pianist so they could accompany me for this audition. So that just really marked my entry into that next part of my life, which was moving out of my small town, going to college, face first into intense music program at Humber, and was kind of my entry into jazz as well. I also have Etta James on my list. All I Could Do Was Cry. Once I got embedded in the jazz scene and I had to start, pulling jazz songs out of my hat to do for various performances, and Etta James was just, her songs and her albums, what she can do with her voice just blows my mind. Because as someone with the kind of tone and timbre and style that I have, Etta James is just, she's doing things that I could only wish in my dreams to do, that vibrato, that power, that raw energy, her music's incredible. But All I Could Do Was Cry is one of my favorite songs by Etta. and really sunk into her albums when I started kind of, getting into that jazz scene. I didn't know how many you'd put on my list. How many do you suggest?
You know what? We've had as many as 10. We've had as few as 1. So.
Okay, I have a few more.
Okay, perfect.
And I've kind of, like, as you can tell, I've marked them with milestones in my life, so they are all very accurate to the tracks of my life, if you will. The next one I had on my list was "Tonight's the Night" by Neil Young. And there was a point when I was in jazz school where I was like, okay, I'm good on the jazz. I've had a good dose of jazz music, which I did love. And I did learn other styles of music and was kind of like pushed outside of my comfort, zone at Humber, which was great, getting to sing and perform so many different styles of music outside of jazz. But I had never, my mom played me Neil Young when I was a kid. I had never dove into Neil's records in a kind of obsessive way as I did halfway through my time at Humber. And that's when I started buying vinyl. I moved in with a roommate who had this beautiful, record player. She had all these records. She listened to everything from doom metal to folk music. And so I started collecting records, and it started with Neil Young, every Neil Young record. But "Tonight's the Night," I just think is this incredible, scrappy, fun record. And that being the title track is the one I put on my list. I had to add in a Fast Romantic song on this list because it marks such a pivot in my in space and time for me. And so I put Julia on there, which was a single we released when I first joined the band. It was one of the first songs it was the first song we put out after I had joined the band and made this record with them. And it's a song we've played, in all of our sets for the past 6 years. So that really just marks, a point in my life where I decided to, I never thought I would be in another band. I'd always just done my own thing. And so the idea of working with all these other people and collaborating, and it was really appealing to me. As I mentioned before, I like to do a lot of different things. I like to satisfy a lot of different parts of myself, and being in Fast Romantic satisfies such a nice part of myself. So that was definitely, a new path for me. And then I put in, I have Oasis, which, like I said, I'm a late bloomer to a lot of old music, which I call new music. And this past year, I got really into 90s rock music. When it was the 90s and I was, a kid, I didn't listen to that stuff. I was still in the folksy, listening to my mom's mixtapes vibe. So now I'm discovering all this music, and I had to put Oasis down on here because it was just a huge part of the last 2 years of my listening experience, diving into Oasis. And, like I said, Matt's laughing because I'm discovering, I'm listening to Oasis for the first time. And I mean, he's excited for me. Oh, I'm so glad you get to experience Oasis for the first time now. But I put Stop Crying Your Eyes Out by Oasis, which isn't one of their, I don't think major hits, but it was the first song I fell in love with when I started circling through their discography. And then the last one I put on my list was AM 180 by Grandaddy. And I have been on a Grandaddy kick for the past couple years. Their sound, their vibe has totally influenced this new record, which for me was more crunchy guitars, mixed with, just the vocal style. Some of the synth lines, was just heavily influenced by, the kind of 90s rock I was cycling through. And then Grandaddy, which I love their band. I love all their records. And AM 180 is the song I listed as my last track, as the most current, if I'm my chronological order of mixtape songs.
One last question for you, Kirty, because you mentioned the Paul Simon concert, and you and Matt just kind of in tears. And when you think about, those first shows back, after a year and a half of no live music. Do you expect members in your crowd to have that same experience? And how emotional is it going to be for you? You know, you get through those first couple of songs, at least even that first song, with a full house again.
Mm-hmm. I honestly think it's going to be emotional for both parts. I would, I imagine myself attending a show after all of this has gone on, and that's how my response is going to be, And as a player, on stage, I know that's how I'm going to feel. We got together for a band rehearsal, all second vaxxed, still distanced, but even just jamming out some songs, you can feel it. Like I said, live performance for me is like a therapy session, and there's all these emotions and clogged up in in me, and I know it's gonna be such a release when we finally get back on stage. Hopefully, for the audience, but definitely as a player and on stage playing these songs.
Kirty, thank you so much for this and this, taking the time and hopping on the show. Where can we find you on social media, and when can we get our hands on the new album?
All right. So I usually on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, it's all Kirty at Kirty Music. If you go to my Instagram account, right now in my bio, you can pre-order the new record. So We're All on Fire is actually ready for pre-order. It also has a ton of links to all my new videos. And, on all those platforms, I'll be keeping everyone regularly updated about, we have some new videos in the pipeline and obviously the record coming up. So yeah, you can follow me on any of those channels and stay up to date, but also check out the stuff we've done over the past year as well.
Kirty, thank you so much for this. Cannot wait for you to get back on the road and cannot wait to hear the full album once it's out. This has been the Made You a Mixtape podcast. Thank you to all of our listeners. If you're listening to us on an audio streaming service, if you're watching us on YouTube, or if you're listening to us on RAP Internet Radio in Italy, thank you so much for tuning in. Take care, stay safe, and we'll see you next time.